In this video, I'm just going to discuss a couple of other legal and illegal strategies that businesses can use. So another legal strategy that businesses will use is what we call multi-branding, and that's when individual companies will market their products under separate and distinct brand names. So basically what they do is that they have a whole range of different products, particularly large firms, and you'll see it with soft drink. In order to try and increase their market share, they advertise through all these different brand names with the intention of trying to think that consumers think that they have a lot of choice in the market, and that will lessen the amount of shelf space available for other firms, which allows them to kind of dominate and have a monopoly share of the market. So it makes it harder for other companies to enter the market because there's already enough choice available through all the different soft drink brands, etc., etc. So it gives consumers the feeling of choice and the ability to switch brands, and so it's really just creating this competition within the one firm. So by flooding the market, new businesses can't compete because this one firm has got all the different brands already, and therefore there's already lots of choice in the market. So some examples would be things like Coca-Cola supplying a range of different soft drinks, including Fanta, Sprite. They also provide Mount Franklin, etc. Kellogg's have cornflakes, Special K, Rice Bubbles, so they dominate the cereal market with a range of different brands. Cadbury's with Crunchies, Dairy Milk, Cherry Ripes, Roses, etc. So it's basically when one company dominates the market through advertising their products using a range of different brands, which limits the shelf space available for others. Here's some examples, so you can see you sort of get your main 10 companies here, and then within one company, so say like Coca-Cola for example, you've got all these different soft drinks including Fanta and Sprite and Coca-Cola. Within Pepsi, you've got all your other types and types of soft drinks like your Mountain Dew and your 7-Up, etc., etc. So it can lead to basically two companies having a share of the whole market. If you look around, you can see, if you want to pause it at this video, you can see a company like Mars, you can see what dominant share they have in the chocolate industry, and then Cadbury basically supplying nearly all the other types of brands of chocolate, with Nestle in there as well. And then basically, so multi-branding is legal. What we're going to talk about now is an example of some illegal strategies. So what we call anti-competitive behaviour by producers. So in 2010, the government established what we call the Competition and Consumer Act, which basically meant that they tried to eliminate any behaviour that is deemed to be anti-competitive, which will be detrimental to society in general. So some examples include predatory pricing and what we call cartel conduct. So first of all, predatory pricing, which is now banned under the Competition and Consumer Act, is the illegal act of charging low prices, often below the cost that they actually cost to produce, in order to try and drive a competitor out of the market. So what they basically do is that big companies will often lower their prices significantly until they get to a point where other competitors just can't compete. So for example, Coles and Woolworths might lower their prices significantly to get rid of any competition from like milk bars and things like that. And then what essentially happens after that is that once their competition is eliminated, so that's why it's called predatory pricing, because they're acting as a predator trying to reduce the competition in the market, then they'll raise their prices back up because they've eliminated their competition and they have sort of like an oligopoly, or they have power in the market. So it benefits consumers in the short term, but in the long term, the idea is that it can lead to less competition and higher prices. So firms often act to drive out smaller competitors by mounting a price war, which basically a price war is a fancy word for when two companies continually lower their prices in unison. So like with the milk wars, Coles and Woolworths considerably lowering their prices consistently to try and eliminate competition. Then once the smaller firm leaves the market, the larger firm will raise their prices and be able to enjoy more higher profits. And this is an example of illegal. It's illegal if you're deliberately trying to remove your competition. So it's not illegal to offer discounts and bargains and stuff like that, but if it can be proven that you're deliberately trying to eliminate your competition, then it's illegal. Some examples of predatory pricing. So Coles and Woolworths reducing the price of bread and milk to as low as $1. And the idea is that these products are staple items. So the idea is basically that these are the kind of things that attract people to corner stores like milk bars and things like that. So by getting rid of their the market, not only are they able to establish sort of a monopoly in selling milk, but if they're able to eliminate their competition overall, they can reduce the amount of price in other areas where they're trying to compete as well, so groceries and things like that. If the ACCC proves that it's the intent of Coles and Woolworths to get rid of their competition, then they can face massive penalties and heavy fines. So big companies are allowed to take advantage of the fact that they're big and they have lower production costs, and we'll talk about economies of scale in class, but it can't lower their prices with the express purpose of trying to get rid of their competition. Another example of illegal conduct is cartel conduct. So a cartel is defined as two or more businesses joining forces to try and maximise their profits. So what it can include is that it can be an agreement between competing firms to control prices. So two firms get together, like petrol companies or something like that, and decide that they're going to increase their prices, or they're going to get together to try and exclude entry by another competitor. They're examples of cartel conduct. So it's a formal organisation of sellers or buyers that agree to fix selling prices or purchasing prices and reduce production. Cartel conduct can include two or more competing businesses that agree to fix prices. It can include dividing the market, I'll talk about that a little bit later, or rigging tenders or restricting output, and I'll talk about all these as examples in the next video. The idea of cartel conduct is to reduce the amount of competition, because essentially they're working together, and it can lead to higher prices for consumers. So here are some examples of cartel conduct. So producers may agree to fix or lift their prices in unison, so the consumers basically have to choose between one of the higher prices. This really only works when there's only sort of a couple of main providers in a market, because if there's too many, it's too hard to coordinate and get everyone to raise their prices together. So they can lift their prices in unison. Another thing they can do is they can agree to share or divide the market. So what we call market zoning, which basically means, like, if you've got two major providers, one provider could look after the east coast, one could look after the west coast, or the western side of the city, so that they're not in direct competition with each other. Other forms of collusion is what we call rigging the bidding process. So what I mean by that is that, like, firms will generally bid for contracts. So you might be bidding for a contract to, I don't know, to build a large building or something like that. And what can happen is that one firm can sort of agree to take it in turns and not really bid against each other. So one company will bid with a really extremely high price, with the intention that the other firm will get that contract, and then they'll swap for the next one. So, like, one company might say, all right, we'll do this project for $300,000, and then the other one chucks in some stupid bid that they will do it for $3 million, and then they swap for the next one. So they're not really competing each other or not really bidding against each other. It can also include agreements to restrict supply to the market so that they can boost prices up. Okay, this type of behaviour is generally more prevalent when there's only two or three firms in the industry, which we refer to as oligopolies and duopolies. If there's too many providers, it's a lot harder to negotiate prices. So the ACCC is basically enforced by the government, and they basically have all these different rules about types of competition. So they prevent predatory pricing, they prevent cartel conduct. They also don't allow large companies to merge together, because it can reduce the amount of competition in the market. So Coles and Woolworths, for example, would not be allowed to merge. They do other things like monitoring prices. So where there's a lack of competition, they'll make sure that the producers aren't working in unison. So there's a lot of surveillance of the petrol market to make sure that petrol companies aren't just raising their prices around, like, public holidays and weekends and things like that, to ensure that that consumers don't get exploited. There's a whole range of examples that you're going to be talking about in class. Okay, so basically some legal types of behaviour: price fixing, where businesses try and collaborate together to raise prices. We'll talk about this one in class, but collusive bidding is one where companies take it in turn and agree on who's going to make a bid for a project, so they're not competing against each other. Predatory pricing, when dominant firms tries to reduce their prices so that they can remove their competition. Market zoning we've talked about. The other ones we will talk about in class.